Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell. Brought to you by...
When Signs and Displays Direct was launched 15 years ago, it featured a complete line of banners and stands, product displays, and more. Today, the company is known as SDD and is the industry leader in turnkey, no-inventory POP programs. SDD has expanded into branding programs for both corporate and private label, as well as consulting services for retail showroom design and more. Visit sdd-us.com. That's sdd-us.com. All right, time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, the Holy Brothers, Marvin, Etzioni, and Willie, Aron. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Tell you what, it's great to have you guys here because you both have such interesting careers. I was a fan of two of your early bands that you were in, so I definitely want to talk about that, but we definitely want to talk about the new album from the Holy Brothers. So one of the things that we do here is we'll throw out an album and see where the connection is. So today we spun the wheel and the Who's Live at Leeds came up. So
Of course it did.
Of course.
What's the chances?
What are the odds?
So,
Okay.
so tell us about that, because I believe there's actually a connection to you guys with that album.
There
Go ahead,
is.
Willie. Go ahead.
Okay. In 1978, I was a 15-year-old high school junior and music obsessed. And I grew up in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. And I went to a high school called Fairfax High School.
All right.
Fairfax High School was a very illustrious music alumni group. I'll name some of them: Herb Alpert, Phil Spector, Shel Talmy, producer of The Who and the Kinks and the Easy Beats, Guns N' Roses, Slash, just the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who I went to high school with. It has always had like a long career of a long tradition of music-minded people and musicians. So I went there in the late 70s, and across the street from the high school was a record store called Aron's Records. Same spelling as mine, no relation. And so what I would do is my best friend Dave Sawyers and I, we went to high school together, and we would spend our lunch hour, or sometimes before or after, if we cut class sometimes, we would go to Aron's across the street from the school, and we would buy records. We were just, young, budding musicians and record collector, maniacs. And Aron's had a really wonderful 99-cent and 29-cent rack. And I built a lot of my collection, my record collection from those racks. So one day we're at the store during lunchtime, and the store was so close you could hear the school bell ring from the store. So we're browsing through, and there's a record playing, and the 1 o'clock school bell rings. My buddy Dave says to me, "Oh, it's 1 o'clock. You better go back to class." I go, "We can't leave now. We're right in the middle of Live at Leeds." And then I hear this voice, from behind the counters that says, "There's somebody who likes good records." And I turn around, and that's Marvin. And Marvin was a clerk who was working at Aron's Records. And funnily enough, I had met Marvin earlier that year. He had a band called The Model, which were like a really cool sort of new wavy power pop, quirky power pop band who played at my high school at the Quad. And Marvin also is a Fairfax High graduate and alumnus. I think you were class president, right, Marv?
I was 10th grade senator,
10th grade senator, okay.
in Fairfax. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, so we met. I mean, at that point, from that point on, Marvin and I just started talking about music, and we just connected. And he's a little bit older than I am, but he's always been like a like a mentor figure to me. So like I'd go to his house, go to his apartment, and he'd always play me songs. He was always writing songs, even back then, and I was always singing harmony to them. We just had kind of like a very instantaneous musical bond. We shared a love for, for the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel and the Who and the Kinks, and a lot of music from the 50s and 60s and 70s. We forged a pretty immediate musical and personal bond of friendship, which has carried us all these decades, in 42 years, going on 43. And we would always keep track of each other's musical whereabouts or musical status. And so we had, so that's kind of the long and short of it.
Excellent story. I'm glad that album happened to come up.
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Uncanny. Of course, I think that was probably the only album that they put on the wheel to spin, but to guarantee it.
All right.
Now, Willie, you mentioned the Red Hot Chili Peppers going to school. Yep. I had read that Anthony Kiedis was actually a trumpet player back then.
I don't think it was Anthony that was the trumpet player. It was Flea, Michael Boswell, the bassist. He was a trumpet player.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he was a very good jazz trumpet player. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting how, when you hear something that a musician who you wouldn't automatically associate with a different instrument. Yeah.
Right.
And trumpet and then you picture Flea, playing bass with the Chili Peppers. Trumpet seems like a big jump.
Yeah, but Michael was a very good musician, even as a kid, and he was a total jazz head. I don't even know if he heard rock until he started playing it.
Wow.
He was always kind of a virtuosic musician, even back then.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you what, you talk about, hanging out at the record store. Do you guys remember what the very first record that you bought with your own money? Marvin, we'll go to you.
My parents used to give me $1 on the weekends to buy a 45. And I'm going to say probably one of the first ones I got was She Loves You, I'll Get You by the Beatles, but it was on Swan Records because I don't know if you remember, but Capitol had initially turned the Beatles down in America.
Mm-hmm.
So their manager went to other very small labels, and one of them was Swan, SWAN. And I remember getting that. And I remember I always used to play the B-sides of records as well as a kid. And I loved She Loves You, but I also loved I'll Get You. I thought it was just as good of a song, actually, but it was never on the radio. She Loves You would have been the A side, but I thought both songs were great.
Yeah. Now, how about you, Willie?
The first record I ever bought with my own money.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it was either the Beatles 1962 to 66, 67, 70, the Red and Blue albums. It's either those two or it's Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder. It's one of those three.
You can't really go wrong with any of those.
No, all of them. And then the other album I had right after that was Music from Big Pink by the Band, which my grandparents lived across the street from us. And my grandfather found a bunch of records in the trash can in the alley behind his house. And so two of them were the Beatles Red and Blue album. So I ended up having 2 copies of those and Music from Big Pink. And Music from Big Pink had a big impact on me because there was a teen-oriented magazine that came out in the mid-70s called Dynamite. And it was made for young teenagers like me. And one of the articles in the magazine had a list of the greatest albums of all time. And number 1, I think, was Abbey Road. But number 2 was Music from Big Pink. And the guy who had written the article said, "This I consider the greatest band in American rock history." I'd never heard of them. This was 1977 or 8. No,
Okay.
let me think. No, this was 70. I'm sorry, 76.
Okay.
I'd never heard of the band.
What
I
year
was
did
not
the original come out?
68,
Right.
1968. Um, I had not heard of them, and so when I first heard it, at 13 years old, I was used to the Beatles. I was not like a rock music oriented kid so much. I mean, I'd heard the stuff on the radio, but my brother's first wife was African American, so the music of my childhood was more like R&B, like the Jackson Five, the Spinners, the OJs, Al Green, Rufus and Shaka Khan, Stevie Wonder, Curtis Mayfield. That was the stuff that was percolating in my environment when I was like 8, 9 years old.
Wow.
I didn't hear the Stones and the Who and the Kinks and all that, and Led Zeppelin, Yardbirds until a little bit later, till the mid to late 70s. So the band, it took me a little while. I mean, I loved it, but I couldn't quite like put my finger on what it was until maybe like when The Last Waltz came out a couple of years later, and that kind of cemented it for me.
Interesting. Now tell me this, since you have this diverse music of your youth, how much of an influence did those artists and songs play on your songwriting as you started to write?
Well, I mean, I've always been influenced by Curtis Mayfield and Stevie and all those guys. That's as big a part of my musical DNA as the Beatles are. It's always been a big part of what I do. In terms of guitar playing, I always gravitated towards simple. I mean, I'm a multi-instrumentalist, so I play keyboards and guitar. But I prefer, like, when all my peers in high school were like shredding to Van Halen. It just didn't register with me. I couldn't do it, and it just was like something that I couldn't really like grasp. The whole kind of like pyrotechnical guitar thing. It's never, it was just never anything of interest. And so I just always gravitated towards like simpler, more groove oriented people to be inspired by. And I actually consider Pete Townsend in that regard, even though he's not like a groove player, he's a rhythm master. And I always was just more interested in people who had command of rhythm. Jimi Hendrix, I think, is a super underrated rhythm guitar player. I think that's that's part of his genius. Everybody kind of like gloms onto his lead work, but his rhythm playing to me is like straight out of Curtis Mayfield, which is one of the reasons I respond to it so much.
Yeah. Now, how about you, Marvin? What were your early influences?
I loved when I was a kid, I loved 45s. I loved songs. And I was talking a moment ago, when you were talking about those like our soul records. Maybe one of my all-time favorite 45s as a kid was Everyday People by Sly and the Family Stone, which is one of my all-time favorite artists, but I remember as a kid, when I got that dollar on the weekend, we went to Sears Roebuck. My parents were shopping, and rather than just getting a single, they had a giant bin that was like the size of a big door, and it was filled with hundreds of 45s, and there was a sign on it that said 20 singles for $1.
Oh, wow.
And I had $1 on me. So I thought, well, I could either buy a hit record that I'm going to hear on the radio, or I came up with this game called Look for the Song. And it was just something that it was like a one-person game, and I bought 20 45s I had never heard of before, and I'd listened to the A and the B sides. And I found like one or two songs in there that I liked, but I was very fascinated with 45s and always looking for the A and B side. Like, let's say like the Hermits, Henry VIII single, I thought the B side, The End of the World, was a better song. I was really captivated by sad songs even as a kid. So that's kind of a connection that I had at that time,
Yeah. Now, see, for me, as a kid, I was always such a music geek that I would look to see, read the credits, producer credits, songwriter credits.
Right.
And then when I would come across stuff like, the 20 for $1 bin or what have you, I'd go through stuff and I would look for those people that had done records that I really liked, and find stuff that I wouldn't have looked at if I went solely by the name of the artist, especially like going through a cutout bin or whatever, finding stuff that should have been big, but wasn't or whatever. And I found a lot of really good music that way.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you found, Michael?
Some of them were bands I just stumbled onto, like the Stompers out of Boston. I found them, great, pub rock band, if you will, for them. Of course, my mind goes blank now as I'm trying to think of it. But, it was, we talk about this in the show, quite a bit. One of the things that I miss is liner notes.
Yeah.
Because I miss, because I used to get the album, put the headphones on, and then listen. And then, the first go around, it was always just take, the big picture of the album, and then subsequent listens, pick out what the guitar player was doing, what was the bass player doing, what was the keyboardist doing, the production, how was it layered, what was the arrangements, what was brought in to accentuate, or to elicit an emotion, with the addition of glockenspiel or whatever it might have been with it. So that was always my thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably, a fairly universal thing for people who are really into music.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you always want to investigate further, I think, I think the Rolling Stones had, and the Beatles too, but the Rolling Stones, I think, had a very profound impact on turning people on Americans, onto American blues. The Beatles more R&B and soul and Motown and stuff, but I think in the Stones case, I've heard countless musicians say that they learned about Jimmy Reed and Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters, through reading, the back of Rolling Stones albums and figuring out, who's Elias McDaniel, who's McKinley Morganfield, and you find out.
I discovered Bo Diddley from the New York Dolls, because they covered Pills from the first Doll. It's on the first Dolls album. And then one day I was at Aron's, when I wasn't working that day, I actually found a used copy of the Bo Diddley album. It was called Originator, and it had Pills on it. I freaked out. And then later on, I got his first album. And so, yeah, that was a revelation for me. All of a sudden, him and Jimmy Reed were my first two artists that I really connected to, and that kind of broke down the barrier for me in blues, that I didn't have to go to the Stones or the Kings and even the Who or Zeppelin to listen to blues. I could go back to the original source, which I actually prefer anyway.
Yeah. Well, you can't go wrong with Jimmy Reed.
No, you cannot. No, you cannot. Apparently, there's stories that there was something about his groove when he played, that groove he did, and no one would want to follow him. Mm-hmm. No one would want to follow him. It was just real powerful. It was a real invention. No one sounded exactly like him. He didn't sound like Holly. He didn't sound like, Chuck Berry. He did have there was a Jimmy Reed sound,
Yeah,
for sure.
That's like
groove.
When ZZ Top covered "Dust My Broom," that sent me on to an Elmore James.
Oh, yeah, right.
West.
Marvin's got the 70. Marvin, don't you have the 78 of "Dust My Broom"?
Yeah, I actually do.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'll hold on. I'm gonna look for it. Hold on a second.
That's another one of the great 45s of all. Great artists of all time.
Absolutely.
But there's an interesting Jimmy Reed story that Marvin was sort of alluding to. On our album, on the Holy Brothers, My Name is Sparkle album, the drummer that played on our album is James Gadsden. And James Gadson, if you don't know, James Gadsden's one of the great drummers of all time. He's played with Marvin Gaye, and he's played with a bunch of people. But his main claim to fame is he was in Bill Withers' band when Bill did the Still Bill album, which was his sort of big smash record, his second album. And James had told us that, and James, prior to that, he was already like he played drums in the military. And then when he was a young guy starting out, he was, on one of these package shows that was at the Apollo in the late 50s, early 60s. And he was saying that the lineup was something like, I'm not 100% sure, but something like Clyde McPhatter, Jackie Wilson, Laverne Baker, the Moonglows, the Flamingos, all and Jimmy Reed. And you would think that Jimmy Reed would go on first, and Jackie Wilson, they used to call Mr. Excitement because of how incredible his live shows were. But what I heard is that Jimmy Reed went on last.
Wow.
And the reason why is it's James Gadson had said nobody wanted to follow him. He said he tore it up. He tore it up as soon as he launched into that groove, that Baby What Do You Want Me to Do groove. He said like women lost their minds, throwing in panties on the stage, fainting. It was like no one could follow Jimmy Reed. Remember Marvin that Gadson told us that?
Yep. Check this out.
Oh man.
This is the original Dust by Broom 45. I'll tell you how original this is. It says Elmo James.
Oh,
ELMO. This is on Trumpet Records. And I got this for myself as a present some years ago. And I have a 78. This is a 78, folks. They don't make these anymore.
That's right.
I can tell you that. But
okay,
I've got
Marvin, I'm officially jealous.
You should be. Hold on. I've got an old 78 Caliphone turntable tubes. I'm gonna play it in the background. It's arguably one of the greatest sounding records ever made. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
We'll wait for that.
Michael, you chose the right people to interview.
If I
It doesn't get better than that.
Nope. That's it.
Man.
That's as good as it gets.
I'm going to guess, Marvin, I'm going to guess that's one of the crown jewels of your collection.
Well, I'll tell you, man, I like all sorts of music. I really do.
Yeah.
But when I hear that record, I go insane. Like if an alien came down from another galaxy, he goes, you got something for me? I go, here, take this with you. Take my 78 player, figure out how to plug it in and play this. And this is the best of what the human race produced over the last 100 years. We've only been making records for 100 years, not that long of a time, considering how long we've been around. Mm-hmm. We've been writing, we've been praying to God for thousands of years, poems, stories, books. But in terms of records, we haven't been making records that long. But we really started in such a powerful place because the word record really means document. Right? And it never really got better than that record. There are variations on the theme, but I can put that record up next to Meet the Beatles. I can put it up next to Sticky Fingers. I'll put it up to Nevermind, Nirvana. I'll put it up next to anything. Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder. I'll put it up to Prince, Run DMC. I'll put it up next to anything, and it's just as good. It's just as powerful. It's so real and commanding. I mean, that's the power of the human spirit on that record.
Absolutely.
That's not doctored up. That's not cleverly made. And, you can hear the overdub. Oh, they did an edit there. And, he came in on a Thursday and did his vocal. We'll do the drums on a Tuesday. It's not like that. It's not constructed. It's explosive. It's an experience, and I really think, we're talking about Hendrix earlier. I really like the lightning in a bottle people. I think Jimmy had that. I think Billie Holiday had that. I think Lennon had that. I think Hank Williams had that. I think Dylan had that. Sly had that. There's so many, for me, it's that lightning in a bottle experience from an artist that I really gravitate to. And so thanks for listening to that one. I had no intention of playing it. I forgot I even had it, Willie, until, oh my God, Willie's right. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a funny Elmore James story. I've tried to impart my passion for music on my son. And when he was little, real little, the only song that would immediately calm him down. You know how toddlers could just go into an absolute fit of rage.
Really?
Nothing will calm them down. Huh. The only thing that
happens.
Work,
okay.
Yeah. You mean it's not just mine?
Oh, okay. No, it's not.
The only thing that would calm him down, he would hear the opening riff of Shake Your Moneymaker.
Oh, yeah.
He would.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
And he got to where he had to be about 2.5. He knew all the words, and he would walk around singing Shake Your Moneymaker. And
wow.
So but he could be just a complete meltdown, and we had that song ready to go in the car at any given moment, just as a way to do it. So, but I don't know what the connection was, but whatever it was, that Elmore James did the trick.
I don't collect 78s, but when I found that one, I thought, this is something else. This really is something else. It's not the same as listening to it online, folks. It's not the same as a digital reproduction. I'm not saying it's a bad thing that people all around the world, like if you're watching the show and you go, wow, I want to hear that Jimmy Reed, or I want to hear Elmore James, or, you can immediately gravitate and go to it. When Willie and I met when we were kids, if we wanted to find something, we'd have to dig through record shops. There was no online. There was we had to talk to each other, and we had to discover records, like you said earlier, Michael, about reading the back of a liner note. It's like you had to love it. It wasn't just a click of a button and go, okay, blues songs, and then 50 come down. It was like you had to really find it, experience it, and embrace it.
Well,
I just found
Absolutely.
this record a few years ago. I just loved the cover, but this is another one that I love. Leadbelly. You can see by this is a 10-inch on Folkways, very thick vinyl and very thick packaging, but Folkways did a lot of folk, and they also did blues. Another one I got, I only have a couple of these 10 inches, but this one, I also have a box set. I have a box set of his. It has, I don't know, 10, 12. I've had his box set for decades. I haven't gotten through it all, but every time I put on a record, it's got like 15 songs on an album. He's never recorded a bad song. Not one song. You might like some more than others.
Right.
But he didn't write 100% of his songs, but, Moanin' the Blues, Lovesick Blues, Honky Tonk Blues, Long Gone Lonesome Blues. I'm a Long Gone Daddy. I mean, if that didn't influence Springsteen, I don't know what did. I'm so lonesome I could cry. Well, there's the center of the universe of songwriting right there.
There, yeah.
The Blues Come Around, My Sweet Love Ain't Around. I mean, that's just on one EP. That's just on one EP.
Well, one of the things, Marvin, I find interesting is the fact that for everything that Hank Williams did as a country artist, there was a period of time where he got more credit and acclaim for musicians in rock and blues and other styles than what he did within the country community. And
it's all the same stuff. I mean, if you got a great song, I don't care if you're the Who or Dolly Parton or the Stones or whoever. Anybody could sing "Dust My Broom." Anybody can sing "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." Anybody. I don't care what genre. Songs are beyond genre. Genre is about style. So, and you combine your style and point of view when you sing a song. But if the song is so powerful, you can't break that song down into little pieces. You got to have the whole song together, and it can connect with anybody, anywhere. That's why it connects to so many different people of so many walks of life.
As we've discussed in the show before, to me, the litmus test for a great song, not great record, but great song, a great song can be interpreted in many ways and have it sound like it was meant to be that style to begin with. There's some songs that only work in one vein. What
would be an example of that?
Well, the Hank Williams stuff that you just mentioned is stuff that can be done when Tony Bennett can have a hit with Cold Heart.
That's right.
And so can Hank Williams.
That's right.
With George Thorogood can have a hit. With Moving On Over. Ray Charles, the whole Ray Charles Modern Sons of Country and Western album. When Ray Charles is singing Buck Owens, that is a testament to a great song.
Songs, unlike a lot of people, songs are colorblind. Songs transcend. It was songs and music that was the social common denominator for the social movement and the civil rights movement of the 60s, and continues to be so, and deservedly so. Well, so that's what brought kids together. It wasn't the politicians, folks. It was the music that got the kids, the black and white kids, dancing together. Politicians tried to separate people, segregate now and forever. Bullshit. It's like we got to have people together, coming together. Music brought people together.
Well, it's like when you go to the Stax Museum in Memphis, they've got an interview with Rufus Thomas. Saying how we listened to the Opry. When the Opry was done, then we'd go back to playing our music at home. On the porch playing guitar or whatever. And Stax is a one of the preeminent examples of color means nothing. It's about the music.
Right. And that is continually, it's the power of art, it's the power of music that will continue to change our culture and our times. And this isn't about taking a political side. This is just about the history of it. When you've seen grown adult people divide people up because they have political power, or you see musicians and songwriters and bands play each other's songs. They didn't care. It didn't matter to people like Willie and I, who made the record, as long as we liked it. It was that simple. We didn't buy it because they were a particular color, or we didn't buy it because they were a color. No, it was if it brings inspiration, bring it on in. That's what it's about. Motown, Stax. I mean, Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" and Bob Marley's work. This is what brings people together.
That's the beauty of music.
It's beyond politics. It's much more important and long lasting than any political speech at any time. It's the power of song, and it's the power of the artist. That combination.
Absolutely.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.